Hi everybody, I'm Tony E at Show IP Interface Brief, and today is day 58 of the 100 Days of Labbing journey towards my CCIE. It's been a fun night. I was out with my son's karate. We came home late. We had to finish up homework, finish up our chores, and then I hopped right here into the office, and let me get my camera right. And I saw Dewan was streaming right away, so I hopped on and watched his stream, and man, there's something magical about that guy. Let's see, we get this right. I got all these lights from the ceiling back there behind me, and it sometimes it puts me in the dark. Anyhow, so tonight I went ahead and reviewed a section of the lab that I did on Sunday, which was Multicast. There was a section in a CCIE lab that I did on Sunday, which was Multicast, and I skipped it. It was the very last section of the lab. I think I was a little burned out. I had put 6 hours of straight lab time in, and I skipped it because I was sure that I wasn't I didn't know how to configure all of the elements that I needed, so I definitely didn't want to just fumble my way through it. I wanted to be direct with my config. So I printed out the answer key tonight and actually reviewed it, and it was only a couple of lines of config to actually make this work. So I went ahead and plugged those in to the lab tonight and made that work. So I don't consider that, like myself, like I've figured it out, like I've discovered the answer on my own. But definitely I wanted to expose myself to what the correct answers were, so I know how to correlate the requirements to the elements that they were expecting. Because, doing labs, certification labs and labs by yourself, ones that have strict requirements, it's not just about knowing the configuration and the validation and the troubleshooting. It's also about understanding the language used in the requirements. And so reading some of the requirements and making sure I'm familiar with the language that they use, and then looking at the answer key and understanding what they expected out of that request is something you need to be familiar with as well. So that's what I went through tonight. I definitely need more work on multicast. I always say that because I always end up failing the multicast section. Tonight I even took the book to karate class. I love this book. It is a very old book. I think it's from 2000. Wait, it says 2012? Is that right? No. Copyright 2000. Copyright 2000, I think. I see two different copyrights in here. Anyhow, it is a pretty old book. I don't think it's 2000. Maybe it is 2012. But it is really, really awesome and really, really helpful. So I read the multicast section about multicast tonight while at karate class. And like I said, when I came back, I saw Dewan was up there streaming. So I went ahead and joined him. Man, he had a killer stream tonight. Man, he was rolling through it. He was going through switches. He was going through routers. He dipped into the ASA. He was doing show commands. He was introducing a lot of folks to some very helpful information that you're going to need for your CCNA and working towards higher level certifications, CCNA security and CCNP stuff as well. So I was trying to take a couple of notes while he was streaming on some things that I thought that might be helpful for other people. So one of the things I do all the time, let's see if I can move my my screen down here. I have a lab open here. This was the lab that I was working on actually. This is not a clean lab. It is a dirty lab because I've been in it since Sunday. So there's lots of interfaces, lots of routes, lots of IPv6, IPv4 routing protocols, tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff. But we're just going to use a couple of really cool commands and show you what it looks like in a live environment. So one of the things I want to look at is show IP interface brief. Let's just take one of these. I'm going to use an unused interface. Look, this Ethernet 02 interface is unused. So if I do show run interface, paste that in, we see it just gives us just the little bit of config that makes up that interface. But that's actually not all the config for that interface, even in its default state, right? This is a shut down interface with no IP address. There's no configuration on it. This is not all the configuration that's on that interface. What you're seeing when you do a show run and you spacebar through this and you look at your interfaces, in this case I was looking at Ethernet 02, what you're actually seeing are all of the elements that you've configured that are not the default. And you're probably thinking, well, what do I mean by that? This is sort of a roundabout way for me to explain. If you do show run all and just hit enter, you're going to see a much longer running config than what you're used to seeing if you just do show run. And what this is doing is this is showing you all of the elements that are currently configured in the configuration. But you don't actually see them in your show run because it's only showing you the things that aren't default. All of these are default. Look, I'm just spacebar through this. I don't even think we've gotten to the interfaces yet. There is a lot of stuff configured by default. I think here's our first interface. Interface loopback, so you know the loopbacks are first. Look at all this that's configured there. There's a ton of information configured there. Now, just because we have, let's go ahead and take a look at that loopback. Show run interface, loopback 103. You see, all I have configured on that is a single IP address. But like we just saw in the show run all output, there's a lot of information that's actually configured on there. The IP redirects is configured by default, IP unreachables is configured by default, IP proxy ARP is configured by default, the IP MTU is configured by default. All these things are configured by default. So, how is this useful? How will you actually need to know this? Sometimes, especially in the type of labs that I do, there will be a requirement that says configure the IGMP query interval to be half the default value. Now, what they want you to do is actually recall it from memory, and they want you to know exactly what it is by memory. I don't know what it is by memory, so I'm going to do show run all. And because that's a lot of configuration, and I want to go down and see Ethernet 02, I'm going to do show run all, and I'm going to do begin interface Ethernet 02. And if I just hit Q right there, this is going to give me a large chunk of that Ethernet interface. Now remember, the Ethernet interface had no IP address and was shut down. But here's all the configs that's actually on that interface. And that's not all of it. In fact, I hit Q at the bottom just to quit so I didn't have to page through it all. But I think in here, the IP IGMP query interval is 60 by default. So if a lab told me, configure the IGMP query interval to be half the default value, I could get into that interface, which is ETH02, paste this guy in, and hit 30. Now when I do show run interface ETH02, you can see that new value is there when I just do the show run interface. I didn't do show run all, I just did show run interface. That value is now there on the screen because it is not the default. It is different than the default. And again, we can see the all if we do the begin interface Ethernet 2. And here is, let's see, IGMP. Here is the value we just configured. So that's one of my additional commands I wanted to make sure I shared with everybody, especially you guys starting out in CCNA and well, at the CCNA level, you may not ever need to use the show run all command. At the CCNP level, you should start looking at the show run all for some of the interfaces, just so you can be aware of sort of what is turned on by default, so you really know what you're configuring. Interfaces aren't blank. They don't have zero config on them, even though it looks that way. They actually have a lot of config on it, and all you're doing is changing the defaults. And what I mean is show run interface ETH03 has no IP address. So when I put an IP address on there, or I was going to say maybe the the shutdown value. I'm trying to think. I think the IP address and shutdown should be the default, but it's showing you them anyhow. Maybe they're bad examples. I was going to say when you configure an IP address, that is not the default. So that's why it shows up in the running config. But here it says no IP. I don't know if that's platform specific or not. So now I'm sort of second guessing myself. I don't know if that's platform specific, but try it out. Definitely try it out and explore that show run command. Another thing you can do is show run and just use the question mark, and you get to see all the available options. I know when I was in CCNA class, which was only about 4 years ago, all we ever did was show run. We never explored any of these other options. And it wasn't until one day I thought about using the question mark after the show run command when I saw that there was an all. And I was like, what is this all? And then I started exploring that and how to filter through it. Another good one, which I don't have AAA configured, but if you just wanted to see the stanza of configs that contain your AAA, show run AAA. I don't have it here, but if you had the AAA authentication and AAA authorization and AAA accounting, if you had all of those configured, you would see only that section of the running config. Instead of having to do show run pipe include AAA, you just do show run AAA and it'll give you that config right off the beginning. Duan already covered the show run interface, which is a little command that I use heavily in almost everything. Another one I want to show you is partition. Partition is pretty good, and it's a little different than section. So there are a couple of operators you can use. You can do show run, pipe, include, and I want to include anything that has a PIM configuration. So I'll hit enter, and I see that I have two elements, IP PIM sparse dense mode. Now I know that this is configured under an interface, but if I just do show run pipe include, that's the I, PIM, I'm not actually seeing the interface. So here's where I'll introduce something to you which I call the double pipe. It's not truly a double pipe. If anyone's ever worked with the Linux command line, you know you can pipe from one standard output to another standard output to another standard output if you keep putting the pipe character. It doesn't work the same here, but I call this the double pipe because it's similar. So I know that this is under an interface config, but how do I find out what interface it is? If I type interface here and also use PIM, when I string these terms together, it treats this pipe as an OR statement. So it means I'm going to show the running config and only include the lines that contain interface or PIM. And here's all of the lines in our running config that contain either the line interface or PIM. So why would I use this? Well, now I know that these two PIM configurations are actually under, one of them is under interface Ethernet 01, and one is under serial 10, right? Because there's not another interface in between there, or else it would have shown up in the output. So I know that this configurable element belongs to this interface. And let's see how far we can go. What if we also want to do, I also want to see what the IPv4 address is. So now I'm showing the running config. I'm including all line elements that contain the word interface or PIM or the phrase IP address. And I put it in parentheses so it will accept the space. Some iOSs will accept the space and some won't, so I just put it in parentheses because. So what do we have here? This interface, loopback 103, has this this IP address. It's showing me these lines. Just another way to sort of manipulate what I call the double pipe. In this case, it's more of a triple pipe. Another thing we can do is show run, and we can do section, which Duan went over here, router OSPF. You do have to spell it right if you want to see anything. And that'll show you that section. But let's say I want to do something like, let's say there's a section I want to look for. This isn't a real section, but let's say there's a section I want to look for that has, and the keyword I want to look for is also another configurable element. So if I do show run section IPv6, I'm not getting a section of IPv6. I'm getting IPv6 and all of the lines that contain it as well. So the section can be a little tricky. I definitely use it a lot. I think this router 3 is probably not a good example. It doesn't have much on it. So I wanted to show you an alternative to the pipe S, which is section. In fact, if we do show run pipe and I do a question mark, you see we have some elements here, which is begin, exclude, include, and section. So typically those, I just use the I, the E, B for begin, S for section. Another one is, if we do the question mark here, partition. This is a really good one. If I want to do partition and do route map, this is going to go ahead and extract out of the running config just the partition that contains the route map section. So if I did show run, maybe this is an example, section route map, hit enter. You see, I'm getting the route map configuration, but I'm also getting a configuration line that just contains the word or the phrase route map. I don't necessarily want this line, but that's how it's interpreting this section. If I just want the route maps, I do show run partition route map. And that'll give me just the configuration elements, not anywhere else where that route map is being used. Another one is, I think if we do partitions, if we do question mark after partition, we can do our access list, which I don't think I have any. Let's see, route map, router, what else do I have? Oh, maybe IP prefix lists. Sometimes I have prefix lists. I don't. I definitely recommend you guys explore this partition keyword. It is one that at the Cisco TAC had to show me, and definitely useful, especially if you're working with a router config that is miles long. And believe me, I've seen production configurations that are miles long, with long access lists and 100 different tenants and different VRFs, and it can just be maddening when you're trying to spacebar through a running config that's a mile long, and you're looking for something that needs in access lists and a prefix list and a route map, and that's applied to a neighbor as it filters routes inbound, and you're trying to piece all that together in the running config. It's just easier to do it this way. Pick your partitions, and you can see them. So router OSPF1, and that'll show us just that partition. Another one was, I think Duan went over show ARP. And show ARP is a great one to find out who your neighbors are. It's really cool because let's say you have, and maybe if I pull up a whiteboard here, let's say you got a router and it's connected to a segment with 2 other routers. And you're SSH'd into this one, and you want to find out all of the devices that are on this segment, that are connected to that segment. Except this guy right here is blocking ICMP. What you might do is you might try to ping a couple of the devices that you know about, but this guy's blocking ICMP. So you're never going to get a response back, and you think, well, that IP address, there is no host on that IP address. The show IP ARP has definitely helped me in production. I've used it a number of times. What you can do on a segment like that is, instead of trying to ping, let me try and get an interface here, which is 0, 1. So let me see. Show run interface eth01. For example, this interface has a /24 on it, which means it's a multi-access segment. It's an Ethernet interface. I don't know how many devices are on that segment. So what I can do is I can go ahead and ping the broadcast address of that segment and wait for the replies. Sometimes this can go on for a while, so you can put like a repeat count of 2 on it is pretty good. So right now I'm pinging the broadcast. And again, if we go back to that topology I just drew, we would not be getting a response from this device because he's blocking ICMP. But what we will be able to do is show ARP, and we will see the ARP response. Another thing we can do is show adjacency. I really love this one because it just gives me a super quick breakdown of the protocols, interfaces, and the IP addresses that it sees on the other side. And so what I like to do in my labs, and this is definitely a CCIE tip right here, is you go ahead and just ping the broadcast address. And I'm talking 255, 255, 255, 255. And you see all these IPs that are returning? I'm pinging my broadcast and it's going out all my interfaces, everything that I'm connected to. And then after that, if I do show adjacency, I can quickly see exactly who I'm connected to on the other side. I think that's pretty cool. That's definitely one way to quickly validate a topology. You know, for example, I don't have a topology. Say this is an old INE topology. Say I got a topology like this with a bunch of routers and stuff. And it's a troubleshooting lab. So the first thing you do is it says, there are 2 faults in the diagram. Locate the faults. Well, the faults could be anything. But one of the things you want to make sure that it's not is IP address or subnet mask mismatch. So you just go ahead and do a quick broadcast ping and then check your adjacency and just make sure the routers can see each other. And if they can, then you know at least that connectivity is established and you have that those values. Okay. So one of the other things I wanted to touch on, and this is for you, Duan, and this is for the Lab Everyday family, everybody out there who's looking to get some hands-on experience studying, working for CCNA, CCNA Security, CCNP, anyone who wants to get hands-on with some lab equipment or is looking for a group of people to lab with. I had mentioned over on Duan's stream tonight Hackerspaces, and he didn't quite know what that was, so I said, you know what, I'll just catch you up on stream tonight. So there are a couple of hackerspaces that are local to my area. Currently, I'm in the Maryland area, right around DC, in between DC and Baltimore. So there's a couple of local hackerspaces, and what a hackerspace is, it's normally a physical place that you can go to where there's a group or a community of people, and normally it's open to the community. Some hackerspaces have some sort of membership where either you pay or you present. I've presented at the Hackerspace a couple of times. It's been a few years since I've been there, but definitely getting involved with the Hackerspace is one of the things that got me where I am today with the level of experience that I have today. And not just with networking, but getting involved with security. And I'm not talking about CCNA security. I'm talking about real security and real incident response and CTFs and zero-day exploits and all kinds of stuff. You can get involved. Normally it's a community place. It's a place where you can go and normally get free resources. Normally there's computers to take apart, there's servers to build, there's internet access. Normally they throw some killer parties, and it's a really good place. And at the Hackerspace that I was a part of, and I haven't been for a while, so I apologize, guys, if you're out there. The Hackerspace that I was part of, called Unallocated Space, is in Maryland. And I donated my old Cisco gear to them and built a couple of rolling racks, and I'm not even sure if they have them anymore. But there was, when I arrived at the Hackerspace, there were shelves, and I'm talking shelves with dozens of Cisco routers and switches on it. And I was basically like asking around when I was a new guy there, what's all this Cisco gear from? What are you guys doing with it? And he said, oh, people come in and they donate it, and we really don't know what to do with it. And at the time, I was studying CCNA. So I was like, you know what? Let me build a couple of CCNA racks in case people want to study CCNA, and they have the real racks to do it with. And they said, sure, go ahead. So I went ahead and got some hardware and some wheels and some carts, and we made some CCNA racks that can roll around, and you can reel them right up to your desk, and got cables and everything. And again, I don't know if they still have them to this day, but they did. But I wanted to point out that Hackerspaces are a great resource for not just networking and getting into Cisco gear. There's a good chance most Hackerspaces have some old Cisco gear hanging around. And if you're not shy and you just want to walk in there and say, hey, I'm working on my CCNA, do you guys have any Cisco gear laying around? I would probably think that most have some gear laying around. Anyhow, I wanted to point out a couple of resources for finding out more about Hackerspaces, if I can. This is the hackerspace that is near me that I sometimes go to. So if anyone's watching this stream and wants to show up to the hackerspace, I'd gladly go over there and join you. They do a lot of community outreach. They hold a lot of events. This is a classroom setting. This one is like in sort of an industrial park. With like one of those big garage bay doors on one side and a regular sort of commercial glass door on the other. And there's tons and tons of equipment to play on there. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on there. It's really a lot of fun. They got a calendar of events. There's always people speaking there. A lot of times if people are presenting at security conferences, maybe they'll come through and they have an event called a mini-con, where they will give talks just as if they were presenting at a security conference. So definitely there's a wealth of people there, smart people in more things than just IT. In fact, you can see some of a picture here on the right side. Someone was working with a soldering iron. Typically, there's a lot of workshops, getting hands-on with a lot of things. Here is their calendar. So there's a DEF CON group here, and I'm sure if you reached out to your local hackerspace and wanted to start a networking night, you probably could do that. Another option you have, again, I'm in the Maryland area, so I brought up a local one, is the Annapolis Makerspace. This is more geared towards people who want to do shop work. There's laser cutters and CNC machines and 3D printers and tons of that sort of stuff. If that's the sort of thing you're into, there are makerspaces all over the world. I would probably look up makerspace near me. I would Google that, and you'll find something. So definitely a really cool group. Again, sort of not geared towards IT, but more towards technology and building and creativity and making. So if that's your thing, sometimes those things go hand in hand. Another local one is Hack DC, Hackerspace in Washington, D.C. And I haven't been here. Some folks that hang out at Unallocated also go over to Hack DC as well. They're a group. Sometimes there'll be CTFs there. And again, I'm sure they probably have some Cisco gear laying around. And if you want to find out more about hackerspaces and groups near you, I would pop over to the wiki.hackerspaces.org. You can probably find one near you. Here's some pictures of, looks like, different hackerspaces in, looks like New York City, Resistor Space. Looks like Charlotte. I don't know which Charlotte, though. And list of events. Let's see if we just pop one to all hackerspaces. I don't know how updated this resource is, so it may be outdated. Looks like hackerspace status active and closed, so it looks like you may be able to pick it out there. Again, I don't know how up to date this is. Looks like this goes all over the world. Australia, Austria, holy crap, Bahrain. Further results. Oh my God, this could take a long time to get to the U.S. But anyhow, I would use this as a resource as well. There's a good chance they have some Cisco gear lying around or some other networking gear, and you can get your hands-on experience. For anyone who is always thinking about, like, maybe they want to get the hands-on experience with hardware. They don't want to use GNS3 or EVE-NG or one of the virtual options. They want to use the real hardware but can't afford it. You can probably reach out to a hackerspace and go use their equipment. That would be my recommendation. So I hope I explained it well. I realize, the target audience of my vlog and my experience is mostly networking folks who probably don't go near a hackerspace, but that's where I got my start. That was actually when I quit being a construction guy and was trying to get a job in IT. I became a member of the hackerspace, and I met a lot of really great people, and it helped drive my passion for security and networking. So I recommend you do the same. I got nothing but great things to say about it. I think that wraps it up for me tonight, guys. I am probably going to work on some QoS tomorrow. Again, finishing up my review of my lab on Sunday. I'm going to use the answer key. I'm going to plug in the QoS values just to see if I understand it, and then I'll get ready for another lab coming up next Sunday. Also, I want to point out we are trying to put together. I say we, but it is myself and a group of other people. I'm trying to get Duan, Mr. Lab Every Day himself. He's supposed to be in my area of the country around Thanksgiving time, and we have lots of other locals as part of the Lab Everyday community, and we're trying to put together a little meetup in our area, which is going to be around Thanksgiving. So if you're in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, Baltimore area, please reach out to us, the Lab Everyday hashtag on Twitter. And make sure you sync up with us. We're going to try and organize a little meetup. Maybe we can just meet and talk and grab drinks or appetizers or dinner somewhere, or just hang out. I don't know. We'll figure it out as we go. But if you're in the area and you want to be part of that, definitely reach out to some of us. Would be great to have you. The more the merrier, I say. That's it, guys. Peace.